Welcome to the Atomic Mommy Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Pingaro, and every week I talk to special guests about everything parenting to help you on your parenting journey. Be sure to like and subscribe this podcast so you can get notified whenever I publish a new episode. Now let's get to it. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Atomic Mommy, the podcast. Today, I have a very special guest who is on the show with me. She's here right now. And let me just give you a real quick backstory on her. She's an exoneree, a writer, and a co-host with her husband, Christopher Robinson, of the podcast Labyrinths. Between 2007 and 2015, she spent nearly 4 years in Italian prison and 8 years on trial for a murder she didn't commit. Please welcome Amanda Knox.
Hi.
Hi, Amanda. How are you? How is everything going?
Everything is going great. Starting the new year strong with just both mommying and podcasting and just surviving.
I think we're all doing that at this point, right?
Yeah. Just fingers crossed. Haven't got COVID this entire time. Yeah. My husband and I have been really fortunate that we were already working from home when the pandemic hit. And so the transition to working from home was not as drastic as it was for some people. And yeah, we're trucking along.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that you stayed safe this whole time. I'm sure a lot of people are definitely wishing they could be the same way. So
yeah,
let's get down right to it. Let's have our conversation. I think that, for those of you who don't really know who Amanda Knox is, it's really important to get some of her backstory. And then we're going to move into all the great things you're doing right now, especially momming. Momming is tough.
Momming is real.
Yes, it is. Okay, so your name is infamous. I know most people don't start out wanting to have an infamous name, but part of it is having that you have that your name is super infamous right now, right? So you served several years in prison for a murder that you were twice acquitted. And here we are all these years later, and you're a mom, you're married. The two of you co-host that podcast. It's really popular, by the way. I was listening to it. It's called Labyrinths. And then you actually never committed a crime, but the entire world won't let you live that down. So why do you think that is? And how do we try to get that to stop?
I mean, it's human nature to just anchor what you've heard about a person with the first thing that you've ever heard about them. And a lot of people in the world, millions of people know my name, but they know it because they had access to media that portrayed me as a cartoon villain in this horrific criminal drama that played itself out over many years. And they had no reason to know who I was before that. And nor do they really have a lot of reason to know who I am after that. And so it's not like I blame people for just continually associating me with the worst experience of my life, because that's very much the only part of my life and my identity that they've ever had access to. The problem with that is that the way that the case was represented in the media was very, very misleading. It was at the expense of the actual facts of the case, where we know who committed this terrible crime. His name is Rudy Gaudet. He had a rap sheet. There's a ton of evidence against him. We've also sort of forgotten the name of the person who actually was murdered, Meredith Kercher. She sort of became an afterthought in the story about that really came down to people's fears and fantasies about female sexuality and about portraying female villainy through this like sexualized scope. And it was a false story, but it was a titillating story. And so when I think about the fact that the worst experience of my life is what people have access to, what's actually true is that a false story about the worst experience of my life is what most people have access to. And as I navigate the world as a free person today, as someone who's had my innocence proven, I really don't know what people think of when they think of me, because I don't know what parts of the story resonated with them, if they had access to the actual evidence of the case, if they think of me as a tabloid, trashy person, as a villain, as a hero, or just as a regular human being who had something crazy happen to them that was really out of her control. Yeah.
I mean, that's really terrible to hear that that's your experience. And I feel that society sort of just goes with the flow. They don't really care too much about doing the background research and figuring out who you are as an innocent person versus being able to monetize the villain that they've made you out to be. And that's tough because you're, like you said, Meredith's name has all been forgone except her friends and family and her loved ones who really cared about what happened to her. And that's a terrible thing to have happen.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you're right. Like there's a really important distinction between who is exploiting this real life tragedy for content and who is casually consuming that content. Because again, like the everyday Joe person who's going about their life and going about their business, it's not their job to research every single story that comes their way. We sort of rely on these institutions to tell us the truth and to tell us what's important to know about these real life dramas that are unfolding around us near and far. And in many ways, they fail us. They tell us stories that are not in our interest and do not do justice to victims and only perpetuate further harm.
Exactly. And, it becomes almost like a false narrative that we're living every single day as we attempt to trust these institutions, even though they're feeding us a lot of misleading information. And that's hard to step away from. And that's why I found it so interesting when I was reading the article with you that you're living this totally different life, and yet no one will actually accept that fact about you, that you're living an innocent life. You're trying to be married. You're trying to be a mother. And I resonated with that so personally that that's why I reached out to you. I felt like that's the story that we're missing. That's the one that matters the most.
Well, thank you for that because, in a lot of ways, I feel like when people think of, quote, my story, they think of all of these things that happened to me that I didn't actually have a hand in. I didn't have any agency when some guy showed up into my house and murdered my roommate, and then I got blamed for it by a bunch of people who were irresponsible investigators and prosecutors. And like, there's not much that you can really say about me in all of that experience because I didn't really do anything. I just was the recipient of other people's actions. And when I consider like what my story is, it's what do I do in the aftermath of that? How do I reclaim my identity in my life after it's been stolen from me? And that's my story. It's not the story that people think of when they think of what's considered, quote, my story.
You're not wrong about that. I think that most people, when they think about Amanda Knox and the life that she has led, they only see the infamous person. And I want to get to know the real you. And I want to showcase the real you because, from my point of view, you are a wife, you're a family member, a cousin, a friend, a mother. And you have so many different sides of you that we should all get to know because not one story defines us. We have so many stories left to live.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
I love that. All right. I'm all yours.
Well, I truly believe it. I really do. So I'm going to ask you this question because it totally boggles me that you served that much time in an Italian prison for something you did not do.
Mhm.
You had to have had some type of survival, maybe mentality, something that maybe you learned along the way in that time period that you could definitely pass on to your children for survival in society. What would you say that is if you did have one?
Yeah. And it's something that I process. One of the big dramas of people who have been wrongly convicted is trying to translate the life experiences and lessons that they learned in that very extreme, surreal environment to the real world. How do you apply everything that you've learned about human beings and how to survive to a world that's very, very different? And for me, it all really comes down to a very simple directive, which is that at any moment, no matter where you are, what circumstances you're in, what opportunities or limitations that you have in front of you, there is always, always, always the best thing that you can do. And you may look back on it and think, yeah, maybe the best thing would have been something else. But in the moment, in the present moment, whatever that thing is, we have the ability to intuit and to reflect and think like, what is the best possible thing that I can do right now that makes my life worth living? And you can do it. And so when I think about like getting through those days, those 4 years in prison, not knowing if it was going to be 4 years or 26 years, which was what my sentence was, I every day just focused in on the present moment and thought, what is the best thing that I can do right now that will make me feel like I am reclaiming some small part of my life? And oftentimes it was something really humble, like write a letter to my mom, or now that we're in the free world, call my mom, or do some sit-ups, like be present with my daughter. I think that, and the way that that translates into my life today is there, it was a sort of like bittersweet thing to be presented with so many limitations in the prison environment, because there were only so many things that I could do at any one time. And so I was able to actually focus. And we live in a world that is constantly asking us to multitask and to be distracted. And as I spend a lot of time now with my daughter, I just really want to focus and be present with her. I had this moment today, even where my husband was adding some music to an upcoming episode of our podcast. And he was sort of went and looking for me in the house and wanted to get my attention and have me come in and listen to his draft of the music. But I happened to be feeding our daughter at the time. And he was like, well, you can do that while we're listening to the music. And I was like, you know what, boo? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to be here with our daughter right now. And when I'm done, I'll come and do that, because I feel like I really, really feel that it is very, very important to be present and to be doing the best thing that you can in a single moment. And oftentimes for me, it's just to like be aware, be a witness of what is happening to me and between me and my daughter in a given moment. And I feel like that is something that any of us can apply to our lives.
I really love that you said you want to be present at all times. I think it's so important that we do that. And as parents, we tend to always think about the future and what we could have done better, but it's so hard to sometimes recenter and focus ourselves on, just enjoying the moment and being there, being present, like you said. And that's really beautiful that you said that. And that's one of the things that you apply in your daily life. Mothers specifically, especially when we're pregnant, we tend to go through all those roller coaster of emotions, and we don't get to really focus on the moment at hand, on just enjoying maybe like a push of a baby's foot in our tummies, or even in the aftermath. So I love that you said that. I really do, because so many women need to hear that.
Yeah. And I also am thinking about like, what is the point of a lot of all of this? Like this whole experience, is it a means to an end? Is my role as her mom to like get my child into adulthood? Or is it to just like, is it also just to be here right now? And I was listening to a podcast recently with Sam Harris, actually. He was interviewing someone who was writing a book about that feeling that we all have of wanting this present moment to be the most efficient so that the next future moment can be its best self. But it's like, actually, shouldn't we focus on now being the best moment just for the sake of this moment, that it doesn't have to be in the service of some future moment? We can just be here. And maybe that's the best way to arrive at that best future moment. I don't know. This is kind of getting heady, but like ultimately we don't have control over what's going to happen next. Like that absolutely was hammered home for me with my experience. And we don't, like, as much as we think that we're setting ourselves up for this future or that future, or our children, we're setting up our children for this kind of future or that kind of future, we don't really know. We don't really have control. And the only thing we really have control over is right now, who we are right now, who they are right now, how we are interacting right now, whether or not we're paying attention. That's it.
No, you're right. You're right about that. Control sometimes is more of an illusion than an actual thing that we can touch. And I think we all tend to forget that.
Mm.
So, you brought up this amazing topic about being in the now, being present, enjoying this moment, making this moment the best moment there could be. With that in mind, how did you survive those early years after the whole, hoopla with time in prison and the trial? I know you said 8 years of trial for something you did not do. Obviously, that's got to be like, did that wreck your brain? Did that, like, what happened after that?
This whole traumatic experience took over my 20s. So I really sort of came into adulthood under scrutiny, under the spotlight, with the threat of imprisonment on me and the threat of everything being taken away from me. Even after I was released from prison, there was the threat of, like, if I got a boyfriend or if I got a job, would that all be stripped away from me if I had to turn myself in and get shipped back to prison? And it certainly was this kind of limbo space where I was at the mercy of other people's judgment and ability to exercise incredible control over my life's outcome. And then to come out of that and to no longer, like in an instant, no longer feel like a hunted prey animal anymore. And to feel like instead of having to react to these very, very powerful, overwhelming forces all the time, to instead imagine a kind of existence where I could be proactive and to be self-defining instead of trying to react to the narrative that was being written about me. That was both incredibly freeing and incredibly joyous and also incredibly intimidating, because there is a kind of learned helplessness that you experience when you have your agency stolen and for a long time. And you feel like no matter what you do, people are going to call you a murderer. And no matter what you do, it doesn't matter if you're innocent or not, you're there in your prison cell. So there is a sense of learned helplessness, and you have to reimagine a relationship with trust and agency and self-definition. And you kind of have to test the waters. I feel like for the past decade, I've been pushing back against what I feel like are all these barriers in my life, and feeling which ones are actually there and which ones are these false walls. And so taking these cautious steps to, have a conversation with you even about what it means to be a mom. Looking back a few years ago, I would have thought nobody's ever going to be interested in even thinking about me as a mom, someone who spends her day momming. They're going to think of me as the girl who was accused of murder, or the girl who is not dead. I can't tell you how, even to this day, it gets thrown into my face that Meredith's dead and I'm not. And that's my fault somehow, that I get to be alive and she
Oh my
doesn't.
goodness.
And when I got married, the number of people who said, who's not going to get married? Meredith. When I got pregnant, the people who reached out to me said, who's not going to get pregnant? Meredith. As if my life is an offense to hers. And so that continues to this day, but I do feel like I'm allowing myself to exercise, to freely live my life and not feel like I have to apologize for it.
As I'm listening to you say this, I have this pit in my heart for you, because no one should have to go through what you're going through, what you have gone through. You loved Meredith. She was your friend for a reason. I don't know anything really about Meredith. As you said before, the media has all but forgotten her name. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that if it was me, and God forbid this ever happened to me, but if I was the one who was murdered as a friend to someone else, like my best friend, I would still want my best friend to live their full life, especially if they did not commit the murder themselves. So I can't speak for Meredith herself, obviously. I feel terrible for the family, for any family who would have to go through that. Of course, I think of my daughters when that happens. But for you as well, you do have to live your life. You do have to mom all day. And it's a blessing that you are not the girl who was murdered. And you really couldn't control what that actual person did to Meredith. There was no way for you to know that was going to happen, and no way for you to control the aftermath of that happening either. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And I'm sorry that you're still going through that. It's terrible that people still really call you murderer. They still come out to you and they say those things to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have a regular daily blocking and deleting and reporting
Is-
activity.
Isn't that so wonderful? It's such a wonderful tool.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I still can't believe like they still bother you like that. Did you ever have an experience? I know this is totally off topic, but did you ever experience that recently, even with your daughter present at a restaurant somewhere where someone's berating you about being an accused murderer?
No one berates me in person. I don't think anyone really has the courage to do that. The most that I get is, and this is a more subtle form of this, is when someone feels entitled to interrogate me about it. So they're not accusing me. They're not saying you murderer, blah, 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 or making jokes about me being a killer in person. In person, what they'll do is they'll be like, oh my God, I heard about your story. Can I ask you about your interrogation? Oh my God, like, did you really do a cartwheel? Blah, 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 blah.
Oh,
And forgetting that they are asking a complete stranger who's in the grocery store about the worst experience of their life. and and it's like, I don't know who you are. I don't owe you any answers. And I'm like, I appreciate that you followed my case with interest, but like I don't owe that to you. And I
it's
get to
so
like,
weird in a
yeah.
grocery store. Like, what's
I
wrong
mean,
with people?
yeah, but like, and like, what's really sad is like, there are some people who are really nice to me in grocery stores, but then they're like apologetic about it because they're like, oh my God, I just really wanted to tell you that like, I heard you on this podcast and I really care. And I'm so sorry I'm even talking to you right now. And I'm like, dude, you're not the problem. You know?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like manners have gone out the window for a lot of people. And then the ones who do want to say something to you that's nice, they almost feel bad to even bother you. It's so weird.
Well, it's because on the one instance, I'm not a person, I'm an idea of a person. That's the person who feels entitled to just like talk to me about this horrible experience that I've gone through. And then there's the flip side of someone being like, "Oh my God, I'm deeply empathizing with this person and I want to tell them, but like I know that's weird and oh God." So like I get it because they're like genuinely empathizing with me and looking at me like a human being and not like this face and this name that they have personal feelings about because they've consumed media.
Oh my goodness. I have to commend you for the simple fact that you are still standing tall. You're succeeding. You're a survivor. You're a mother. You're doing everything that you need to be doing in your life. You're doing it well. You're laughing right now with me. I commend you. I'm literally bowing down to you because I don't think I could put up with it. I think I'd be that person on YouTube who threw like the shopping cart at somebody for bothering me.
Yeah, like I try like to put myself in their shoes and think and I do get like some impatience sometimes with the ones who are really entitled, and I try not to express it. I try to just in the way that like when girls are being uncomfortably hit on by some skeevy person, you sort of back away slowly. You know, it's just another form of skeeziness.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that. That's a really good comparison.
Right? Like it is. It's like some weirdo is just like approaching you and you're giving him the cues that it's not cool and he's still pushing and you're like, all right, I'm gonna back away slowly.
Yeah. I gotta say, you have some pretty cool ways to handle that. I really don't think I could do it. I really don't. I think I would just have a fit. So I'm going to ask you this question because I have 4 daughters, like I said earlier, right? And my oldest, she's about to be 16. She's talking to me about going to college. She wants to
Mhm.
travel overseas. And I have this whole podcast with you. And I'm like, that's a really good question. Before you travel to Italy, right? Did you
Mhm.
think about the laws there? And does anybody really do that? Does anybody look at the laws, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
No, I did not. And I think that a little bit shows my privilege because I never even had to really think about the laws here in the US, right? Like I grew up in a very safe environment where I never got into trouble. I never had any like encounters with police in my neighborhood. Like it was not a situation. I didn't think about the criminal justice system because it never occurred to me that I would ever have to interact with it. And so I just assumed that it was this institution that dealt with bad people. And I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't breaking the law. So why would I have to think about it? And especially in Italy, like at the most, I imagined that like my passport might get stolen and I might have to go to the embassy and convince them that I was really who I was. So the conversations that I was having with, my teachers and my parents were all about like, okay, do you know where the embassy is? Do you have a copy of your birth certificate? Do you have health insurance? So if you get hurt, do you know where the nearest hospital is? Like those are the kinds of conversations I was having, because those were the real threats to life that like I thought that were ahead of me potentially. Though I never ever thought that I might need legal help. And I never, and to be quite honest, I never thought that I would be a victim of a crime as drastic as someone breaking into my home and murdering my roommate. Like I came this close to being murdered, and that never occurred to me that that would happen. So I was woefully ill prepared. And I don't think anyone can be truly prepared for something that drastic. Like, as everything that I've gone through, I can't say like if my daughter goes abroad, I can 100% give her advice that's going to protect her from getting murdered. But what I can say is that it matters to connect with people. Like one of the things that made both Meredith and I very vulnerable in that environment is that we didn't know that many people, and we did our best. Like Meredith didn't move into an apartment where she was just by herself. She moved into an apartment where there were other girls, and she had friends that she spoke to on a regular basis, and they went to parties and groups, and like Meredith was doing everything right. And still this happened to her. And so that's a scary thought. But, what happened to her doesn't happen to everyone who studies abroad. It's a really tragic, extreme example of something going really wrong, despite everything that she did right. And I suppose like the thing for me that I would give anyone advice over is like, you don't have to become an expert in the laws in another country. What you need to become an expert in is asking for help and recognizing that when something is going wrong, it's going wrong, and it's okay to ask for help. And you don't, just because you're off studying abroad for the first time as a 20-year-old, that doesn't mean that you are some kind of adult who knows what they're doing. It's like, that's my biggest thing is in those like 4 or 5 days between discovering that this crime had occurred and leading up to my arrest, I should have asked for help. I didn't know that I needed help. I didn't know that I was vulnerable. I just was doing what everyone told me to do, which was go to the police office every day and answer their questions for hours on end. It never occurred to me that they were suspecting me. I should have had someone, like, I remember my aunt in Germany was telling me, I don't know, they're talking to you an awful lot. Like, you should go to the embassy. And I was like, why would I need to do that? I just should have connected with whatever resources were available to me, because it was a moment of crisis and it was a very scary moment. And I should have asked for help, and maybe I should have gone home. It never occurred to me though. But it was such an extreme situation.
And still, it was an important situation.
Yeah. I mean, I never thought that I would come home that day and find out that Meredith was murdered. Like, that was the farthest thing from my mind.
I think for most people that would be the farthest thing from their minds, no matter where you travel. It's just, I think it's a really hard thing to even imagine that happening. Honestly, I've traveled to many different countries. I've never, ever thought about that myself.
Right?
So it's not something you think about. You think about, I'm gonna stay safe. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to stay safe. Like you said, Meredith was going out in groups. She was not living alone.
Mm-hmm.
It was like she was doing everything in her power to make sure she was safe, and still that terrible, awful event happened to her. And while she's not here anymore, it's really like a warning to other especially young ladies who travel abroad,
Mm.
so that no matter what you do, you still have to have, even more protection for yourself, and what that could be, or what it should look like, is also hard to think about, because I could tell you right now, I'm about to be 38 and I have no idea what extra precautions I could take to
Mhm.
protect myself from that happening to me. I
Yeah.
truly don't. Besides, like, carrying, some type of weapon. And even then,
Yeah.
I don't know how to use all of them.
Exactly. I'm even wondering, very often wondered, like, what if I hadn't met Raffaele 5 days before this crime occurred, and so I was home that night? Would I be dead too, or would Meredith and I been able to fight him off? Like, what if one of us carried pepper spray, which we didn't? And, like, there's a million things that I think, like, if just one thing had gone differently, would all of this have been like, would she still be alive today? Would this never have happened? And, but like, you can torture yourself over those kinds of questions.
Oh
And
yeah, definitely. The what if is the ultimate soul killer. That's what I like to call it. Always thinking about, what if this, what if that was different. It really does crush your soul. It changes
mm,
your whole mindset. It prevents you from learning how to move forward and move, and not
mm,
really forgetting, but moving past it, and sort of like building yourself a trusted foundation that you can rely on.
mhm,
I hate the what ifs of this world. It drives me nuts.
yeah.
Let's talk about your husband and being married, because I'm on my second marriage. I'm with my husband now almost 14 years, and my first marriage fell apart after I had my first baby. So having a baby is very, can be very stressful in a marriage, right? But at the
Definitely.
same time, you have this very strenuous history. Was that something that was hard to bring into the marriage? Did he already know who you were, or was it something, I like to imagine that it was ultra romantic and he had no idea how infamous you were. That's my hope.
We have a really great meet cute story, because while I was in prison, he was getting 2 master's degrees in poetry and being an itinerant poet.
Wow.
So he's this, like, very obviously, he's a poetry guy. He's an artistic guy. He spent years traveling around in artist colonies, and he's also got a degree in philosophy. So he's like just this very thoughtful, poetic, literary guy. And he was not the kind of guy who was up to date on the latest, murder in the news kind of guy. He was, but just by virtue of being from the Pacific Northwest, from the Seattle area, he had heard of my name before. And in fact, I learned later on that his brother, who is actually more my age, Chris, my husband, is 5 years older than me. He actually followed the case pretty closely because he was more my age and going through similar experiences in college when I went through it. But, my husband was already in his master's degree program. He was just like, living a very different life, and that wasn't his interest set. So he was aware that my name was infamous, but he didn't really know anything about the case when he first met me. And the circumstances of us meeting, very gratefully, were about him. I was writing for a local newspaper doing arts correspondence, and I had been given an advanced copy of his first novel that he published. It's published by Scribner back in 2015. It's called War of the Encyclopedists. And I reviewed his novel for the local paper. And then I went afterwards to his book reading. And it was there where he was technically the center of attention, and that I first met him. And I asked him for an interview. And, and so I met him in this, like, kind of peculiar context. And we had a great conversation when I interviewed him. We connected over Star Trek and nerdy things. And we just he after that conversation just, like, shook my hand and was like, "Hey, we should be friends." And that was a really big moment for me, because I had only, like, a month earlier been fully exonerated and, like, fully acquitted by the Italian Supreme Court. So I was only very recently no longer on trial, no longer being hunted down. It was
Aw.
one of those reasons why I even left my apartment to go somewhere public, like a book reading in the first place. And I thought like it was a really crucial moment for me where I thought, oh, wow, I can just like make friends with people in the world now and like a normal person. And so he was one of those first friends that I made. And then we started dating around 9 months later. Our relationship we just really, really clicked. We really, really connected. He did not Google me. That was really crucial to our relationship is like, even when he first just started hanging out with me a little bit, some of his friends would be like, whoa, you're hanging out with Amanda Knox. Like, do you think she did it? And he was like, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in her as a person. And it was only after we started dating and people started writing tabloid articles about him, calling him my boy toy and photoshopping knives into pictures of him.
Oh my goodness.
That he was like, I should probably know what's going on. And he read my book. He started trying to interact with people who were being mean to me online. He had to go through this phase where he was like trying to troll whisper, trying to like convince people who are being mean to me that they shouldn't be mean to me. And he drove himself crazy doing that until I convinced him that it wasn't like, this wasn't a question of people being reasonable or rational. It's not like you can just throw people evidence and they'll be like, oh, I'll stop calling her a horrendous monster. Like, that's not how it works. They're just attacking me viscerally because they hate an idea of me that doesn't exist. And you can't like convince them that that doesn't exist. So, but like, you know, to this day, now he knows the case inside and out, and he's my biggest advocate. And he's the one who's really pushed me to test the boundaries of what I feel are my ability to reclaim my identity and my life. He really, really wants the world to be fair to me. And it drives him crazy when he feels like I'm still going through what I'm going through, which is that I'm defined by something that I didn't do. And so in that way, it's interesting how the stigma of accusation and the trauma of wrongful conviction have ripple effects. And, you know, he wasn't even there, a part of my life as it was happening, but he's deeply, deeply impacted by it now. And that's something that I bring to all of my relationships, be they friends, family, professional relationships.
That's, honestly, I love to hear that because it just says how much he loves you and adores you, that he wants to defend your honor. It's such like an old, I know it's like an old timey.
Yeah, he's totally one of those guys who would like very romantically take off his glove very slowly.
And smack the other person in the face.
Exactly. Yeah.
I could picture that in my head.
How dare you, sir?
Yeah. And you know what? That's great though, because first of all, you really don't always find that in too many men. And so when you finally do find that, and my husband's very similar in that manner as well, it's so refreshing that that still exists in certain men. I love to hear that. I think it's fantastic that you have that you found that you and him together are like, I mean, I don't want to say the perfect couple because there is no such thing as the perfect couple, but for each other, you guys fit perfectly together.
Yeah,
I love
it's
that.
pretty amazing how well we work with each other, and we challenge each other and we comfort each other, and we're constantly learning. And when we bicker like couples, but we always try to be really direct and to communicate. And like one of the really big important things that he does is he acknowledges when he hurts my feelings and he apologizes. And that seems like
Really?
such a small thing. Like we teach children to do that, but like you'd be surprised how many adults struggle to admit when they were wrong, or even if they weren't wrong, but like something they did hurt you, that just like acknowledging it and saying I'm sorry is so hard for people. And as someone who's experienced like incredible amounts of not just like harm from being falsely accused, but then gaslit and victim blamed, like it really means a lot to me that he's willing to acknowledge when, even just like tone of voice things, like if he's snippy with me and I'm like, hey, that hurt my feelings, he doesn't go, well, you didn't take out the garbage. He says, you're right, I didn't need to do that.
That's kind of awesome. You're not wrong. There's a lot of adults who don't have the ability or the mental capacity to acknowledge that what they did hurt the other person. So obviously the apology never comes because they feel like they don't have to, because they
Mhm.
simply didn't acknowledge, they don't realize what they did. And that's something that my husband and I have actually talked about in our early relationship, that it's not always about what he did per se that's wrong, it's how it affected me. And I'm glad
Mhm.
to hear you say that your husband apologizes and actually, says to you, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings like that. It's important to do that, to recognize
Mhm.
that the other person might need to hear an apology.
Mhm. Or just an acknowledgement. Like, I
Yeah.
can't tell you how much healing it comes from someone just acknowledging your harm instead of making you feel crazy to feel hurt.
Yeah, I can relate to that. My first husband and I, we were not good at that. And that's me included with that. I had a lot of growing up to do with that
Mhm.
situation. But I think that when you live through certain experiences, and you've had to experience much worse than I did, obviously I'm not going to try to say I did, but still certain things do definitely teach you how to acknowledge how other people feel. I know that what happened with my ex and I taught me how to be a better person.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, and I take away this, like, this is a wrongful conviction issue as well, because the number of people who are proven innocent with like DNA evidence, and like the prosecutors who prosecuted them and the detectives who investigated them, none of them say, I'm sorry.
Oh
Like,
my goodness, really?
oh yeah, it's extremely, extremely rare for prosecutors or detectives who helped wrongly convict an innocent person to say, wow, the evidence proves us wrong. We're sorry. Like, it is, and I think it ultimately comes down to questions of like legal liability, not wanting to be held accountable, but also like an issue of, I know that like a lot of people don't want to think of themselves as the kind of people who would have harmed someone that way. And so they'll do mental gymnastics in order to imagine a scenario where they couldn't have done anything but harm this person in that way. And so therefore it's the wrongfully convicted person's fault. They were suspicious and they couldn't help but wrongly convict them because there was no other way to interpret their actions, that kind of thing. And that just drives me crazy. Like,
I can
it just
imagine
drives me
so.
crazy.
Honestly, I really don't know why people don't do that. Why can't they just acknowledge and be accountable for their actions? And I understand that you do something now with this kind of work, right? Where you're working with people who have been exonerated and things like that. Can you tell us about that? Because this is so important for everyone to hear.
Yeah, so wrongful convictions are not an Italy thing. They happen they happen all over the world, as it turns out. It happens a lot here in the United States, as it turns out. And there are certain institutional issues, like big institutional problems, the bail system, the coercive interrogation techniques that are legal, the guilty plea bargaining issues. Like, there are lots of like institutional issues that are baked into the system that we could be tackling get to help dissuade, like, fix wrongful convictions before they even happen. And then, of course, there are the examples of the lone wolf prosecutor or detective who goes out of their way to frame an innocent person. And it's shocking with how much regularity it happens that even well meaning detectives and prosecutors will get a suspect fixated in their mind, and through cognitive biases like confirmation bias and like will seek out proof that that person is guilty instead of seeking out evidence that reveals the entire truth. And so they'll subconsciously or consciously ignore exonerating evidence. They'll say, oh, that alibi that that person has, that person must be lying. It really must be them. Or like the number of times I've seen cases where like the DNA proves that like a person who was raped and murdered by someone else. And they say, oh, well, that DNA must be from when that 12-year-old girl had sex with someone else earlier that day. And then the guy I'm suspecting is the one who killed her, and we just didn't find his DNA. And it's like, are you
Really?
kidding me? Yeah. Like the amount of mental gymnastics people will go through to once again, like, not admit they're wrong, not because necessarily they're like, they are cackling in a room going, I must convict this innocent person, but because they don't want to believe that they could be that wrong. And like, they just can't like come to terms with the harm that they have caused. They look at themselves and think, I have noble motivations. I'm good intentioned. I'm trying to get justice. So I can't be wrong. And then they'll come up with all kinds of justifications after the fact to try to explain to themselves and others that they weren't wrong.
I guess, like, just listening to that is just, it feels so wrong. And I know it's wrong. And I don't understand why it happens.
It's a human frailty thing. And what's also an issue is that like we don't have really good ways of holding detectives and prosecutors accountable, especially in this country, because there's so much immunity they have. So when they get away with it once, they get bold and they get away with it again and again. And we really should be thinking deeply and hard about how we can not only change laws so that it's, like it's a very easy law to change where you videotape all interrogations. That's a very easy way to like try to prevent false confessions from happening. But there's also, we need to be incentivizing police and prosecutors to admit that they're wrong when they are wrong. And right now, we do not incentivize them at all. We end up like they lose their careers and their jobs and they're punished and la la la. And why would they ever admit they're wrong if nothing good is going to happen to them? So
You make a valid point. That is a very valid point. But okay, I'm going to ask you this question. I know it's not even on the list I sent you, but I apologize right now.
No worries. I'm here for it.
Because you're talking about this, and my husband is in law enforcement. I want to ask you this question. You are infamous, famous, however you want to say it, for what happened to you. You are an advocate for those here who've had the same thing happen to them. Do you foresee yourself maybe being a part of writing a law that makes law enforcement and makes, the courts, prosecutors accountable for, their wrongdoing when they do it?
I mean, I'd be happy to be a part of that. I don't usually work on the legislative side. I'm more of from the journalistic angle, so trying to help people share their stories. And I think one really important thing to note is I am absolutely not anti-law enforcement, nor is most of the innocence movement. I think that people who are victims of wrongful conviction are victims of crime, first of all, because a crime happened. And it's because that crime happened that someone became a victim of a wrongful conviction. That's most often the case. Now, with women who get wrongly convicted, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes there isn't a crime that ever even occurred, like say their kid dies from a very rare kidney disease and they're accused of having murdered their kid. Like that happens to a lot of women, but like the vast majority of wrongful convictions happen first and foremost because someone committed a crime and law enforcement got it wrong. And so people who are victims of the criminal justice system are also victims of crime. And it's really important to address both forms of harm in a way that is ultimately seeking truth and seeking accountability by those who have committed the harm and trying to make right to the victims of that harm. And I think one of the major flaws in our criminal justice system is we think that we can fix things for victims by punishing the people who hurt them. But let me tell you something, as someone who's a victim of a prosecutor, I don't feel like my life is going to be better by my prosecutor going to jail. There are different ways that we can address harm and we can heal victims of crime that are totally separate from the question of what we then do with the person who committed that crime or committed that harm.
I agree with you on that. I really do. And from listening to you talk about this topic, it's something that my husband and I talk about a great deal of here at home. But listening to you talk about it and seeing how powerful and passionate you are in your discussion on this very important topic, I definitely could see you being a part of the legal side of it and, you know, going to Washington and creating legislation that could help get the message out there that we don't have to punish law enforcement and prosecutors. We just have to tweak some of the laws so that the victims of that wrongful accusation is actually taken care of in a better way.
Yeah, I mean, there are a million ways that we can tackle these very, very human problems and dilemmas and incentivize and disincentivize. And I think that a lot of thought should go into it. And we should be very, very careful not to just fall back on really easy black and white answers that pitch people as heroes and villains when the truth is very much a human drama that falls much in the gray space and in the in between.
Well, yeah, I mean, after all, we are all humans and we all have flaws. So I think it's better to acknowledge the flaws and to work towards making it better instead of just, like you said, doing everything one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
So,
100%.
so it gets a little bit harder when you're a parent, right? Like when we think about being a parent and we have to discipline our children. I could tell you right now, my teenagers are always telling me it's black and white, even though on my end, it feels like it's very gray.
It's not fair. It's not fair, Mom.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that.
How old is your little one?
She is almost 6 months, so she's not talking back quite yet.
So you have those precious days and those precious months with her. Does she fall asleep in your arms like very easily?
Oh my God, yes. Like it's amazing. I'm notoriously really good at sleeping, and she has definitely inherited that from me, and it's such a blessing, I gotta say. It's the best.
Are you like experiencing these moments where she's up all night or does she sleep through the whole night?
So she's currently sleeping through the whole night.
Oh,
The
God bless
one
you.
obstacle that has occurred is that she has, at this point, learned how to roll from her back to her front, but not from her front to her back. And so occasionally, like when she has like a little wake up moment in the middle of the night where normally she would sort of wake up and play with her hands a little bit and then fall back asleep, she wakes up and she's like startled to find herself on her stomach, and she goes, ah! And she like does what I call opposite turtling. And she's like, I'm watching her on the baby monitor going, ah, like struggling with her little legs and arms. And then I go and I flip her over and then she falls back asleep.
But still, that's a really good baby. I will say that. I've had, out of the 4 of them, I think I have one that just had 15-minute power naps all throughout the day, including overnight. And I was just tired all the time.
Oh my God.
I wish that on no one.
Insane. No, she's very good at sleeping.
I'm going to ask you this question. When you were pregnant with your baby, right? Was your husband super attentive to the point where it was like overkill, or was it more like, oh yeah, please, please, please keep your hands on my tummy all the time? Did you love that part, or was it the other way?
It's actually really funny because we would joke back and forth about like whether or not he was doting on me enough. And his like way of being hilarious about that was he like came up with this whole system of like how many dotes I should get a day based upon what stage I was at in my pregnancy. And he like made this whole spreadsheet that explained how many dotes I could expect per day based upon it. And meanwhile, of course, it was just like a fun thought experiment. And like, even, I'm 7 months pregnant and I'm still helping out in the garden, like carrying like buckets full of gravel. And like, I do remember at one point, my husband is currently holding up my daughter to the window in the vocal booth, and she's just smiling at me. It's very cute. But like, I remember 7 months pregnant, I'm bringing up like a bucket full of gravel up into the backyard, and we have like 2 neighborhood teenage boys who were helping us. And I took a tumble, like lost my footing. I took a tumble, and it wasn't a big tumble. I just sort of like plopped on the ground awkwardly, and nothing bad happened. I didn't get hurt. But like these 2 young kids like immediately dropped what they were doing, and they were like, oh my God, are you okay? And my husband was like, she's fine.
He wasn't even worried.
And he was right. I was totally fine.
That's funny. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
He has a lot of faith in me. Let's say that.
You know what's funny about that situation? I actually found myself on my fourth pregnancy. I used to be in real estate, and I was up and down the stairs, and I would think I might have been like 6 months pregnant, and I got really
Mhm.
dizzy and like just I don't know what happened. I just like fell backwards on my butt on the stairs as I was leaving, and my
Yeah.
husband like ran out of the car. And before he could make it to me, I simply put my hand up. I was like, "Nope, I'm good. I'm fine."
Oh.
you know?
The stairs are way more scary though, right? Like the stairs you could keep falling is the
Yes,
problem. Yeah.
yes, you
So
could.
it makes sense to me.
I just was at that point after like the fourth one. I was just like, "Oh nope, I'm fine. Leave me alone. Just go away." Like, don't pay attention to me.
I will say that I was daily putting my feet in his lap saying, these need to be massaged. And he very, very was always willing to do it. So
Oh,
good on
that's
him.
so good. That's good for him. I tell you right now, those feet when you're pregnant and they're so
Oh man.
swollen.
I've never seen my feet that fat. It was amazing. It was amazing.
I'm going to ask you this one question because it's a total like wife myth out there.
uh
What happened like to your feet as far as size goes for like shoes?
Oh God. So thankfully, like I was at my biggest during the summers. So it was sandals all the way, if not just bare feet. But I just got and so I have like really skinny feet too. Like normally, like they're kind of gross in the sense of like they're like bony and like weird and like, and when they just inflated. Like they were you couldn't tell where my ankle was really. It was just so puffy, but it wasn't like painful, interestingly. They were
Really?
just these like big honkers. And I was like, huh, weird. I don't know like if they changed sizes. I just noticed that they were like you could no longer see the bones in my feet. They were just puffy. I felt like the puffy marshmallow man from Ghostbusters, but only in the feet.
That's so funny. Only in the feet. What is your day like as, for motherhood? Like, walk me through a day. What do you do all day with your baby?
Yeah, for sure. So I don't do the thing that I think a lot of, or at least my sister does. I don't know how many people do this, but like I've been told like routine, routine, routine. And I'm not a routine person. I'm more of like adapt to the moment. Are you tired? Okay, take a nap. If you're not tired, okay, well play with your book, like whatever. Like, and I am constantly in my day-to-day life moving between different forms of work anyway. Like my job doesn't require me to just like sit down for 4 hours straight and write and like work on one thing. Like my job as a podcaster involves interviewing with people and then working through scripts and then thinking about music and then outreach. And like, so there's a lot of like different little jobs that I have to do. And what has happened is my full-time job has turned more into a part-time job. And then my full-time job is being a mom. And I do my part-time job of work when my baby is taking a nap. So I wake up in the morning, usually around like 5:30, because that's when baby wakes up. And then I feed the cats, I feed her. My husband gets on the elliptical. I'm playing around with her. And then when he's off the elliptical, it's my turn. She usually falls asleep around that time for about a half an hour. So I get some exercise in, I take a shower. By the time I'm done with that, she is up and we play. I put her on tummy time a lot because I'm still trying to get her to figure out how to go from tummy to back. and and then, when she gets tired or like she really loves to like eat and then fall asleep and she still kind of like eats while she's sleeping in this really interesting way. So like she'll go for a good like 5 minutes after she's like totally out, just like it's like sucking on, and it's like, okay, cool. And then that's when I'll start hopping on emails. I'll start responding to calls. I'll start scheduling. I'll start scripting. And then I'll just keep an eye on her in the background with the baby monitor. She takes naps in her crib. And then when she stirs, I get back to it. And I do the rounds, and like there are a number of things that she likes to do right now. She likes to look in the mirror. She likes it when I do sit-ups with her. Like I'll do a sit-up and it sort of makes her fall down to the ground. And then I'll go down to the ground and sort of pull her back up until she's standing. So we like do a little seesaw action. She really likes to chew on this silicone mushroom that we have. And we're just starting to see if she's interested in food. So we give her a little bit of kiwi, a little bit of avocado here and there. And mostly she just makes funny faces as we give it to her. And then she puts it in her mouth and she's like, what happened? What was that? And yeah, that's pretty much my day, is just kind of moving back and forth between that like mommy space. And then when she is no longer, requiring my attention, then I just go back into podcasting space. And then at the end of the day, I do a little bit of cross stitching.
And wait, what's cross stitching?
It's a kind of embroidery. It's the kind of embroidery where you make little X's. So you draw pictures out of thread, but with it's almost like pixelated a little bit. Anyway, it's a form of embroidery that I find relaxing. And I do that while my husband I either listen to music, or we'll listen to a draft of a podcast episode, and I'll give him notes on like the music or the flow, because he does all the audio engineering. And then we call it a day around 10.
You are a super mom. Just want to tell you that right now. Well, first of all, when I was listening to your energy for the whole day about what you do every single day, I was just like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. I need that energy back. And then I heard that you embroider. I'm like, wait, she knows how to embroider? What did I miss in my life?
My Oma was a seamstress growing up. My Oma was professionally a seamstress when she lived in Germany before she came here to the United States. And so I grew up basically with sewing toys. Like she would give me these little versions of crochet needles, but they're made of plastic, so you can't poke your eye out or whatever. And I was playing with those kinds of things when I was a kid. And so I learned from a young age how to do those little handsy things. And I treated them like toys when I was a kid. And so instinctually, I just kind of have those activities, sort of like learning to ride a bicycle. There's kind of in there weirdly. I never really learned them. I kind of learned them through play, which is interesting because I know how to sew, but I've never learned how to sew. I don't ever do it the right way. I don't really read patterns. I just kind of make it up as I go along. And then sometimes it fits and sometimes it doesn't. And then you make adjustments,
Well, I'll still give you credit for that one because I'm a pro at doing buttons. I can sew a button on anything.
It's very important.
Yes. But ask me to sew anything else and I'm in the dark. So I'll give you credit where credit's due because that's awesome.
It's a fun little thing to do. I find it very relaxing in the same way that someone might find washing the dishes relaxing. It's an activity where you get to still be creative, but it's not creative in the way that I am professionally. It's nice and calming. It takes a long time. It's a slow process. So you get to sort of relish the moment like you would a good book, that kind of thing.
I could get behind that.
Mm-hmm.
So is this something you think you're going to leave to your daughter? You're going to teach her how to do it so she can pass it on?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Oh, that's cool. That's a really good legacy to leave behind. I wish I taught my kid how to sew a button.
You still can. That's the beauty of it.
Well, once they're teenagers, they don't really want to learn anything.
Oh,
besides
fair.
TikTok.
Just cut off all their buttons and see if they survive. They'll come running.
That is a good idea. That is a very good idea. One I might take seriously and send you a photo of.
That'd be great.
So your daughter is 6 months old. And she's having all these wonderful senses of the world. She's enjoying being out there. Is there anything that you want to do with her that this whole, debacle has set you back and not let you really get to do with her?
You mean the pandemic debacle?
No, more
or
like
just the wrongful conviction debacle.
Yeah, the wrongful conviction debacle.
My biggest fear with the wrongful conviction debacle issue of it is that I don't want her to feel like she's living in the shadow of the worst experience of my life, in the way that, like, there's always the danger of me feeling like, if I'm feeling like I'm living in the shadow of the worst experience of my life, I definitely don't want my daughter to feel that way. In the way that, like, my sisters feel that way. They're Amanda Knox's sister in a lot of people's minds. And it's deeply damaging to be viewed through that lens, through as if like the most important thing about you is that you are adjacent to someone else's horrific traumatic experience. And I don't want her to feel that way. I want her to be able to feel like she's her own person with her own value, and she's not just like a side note to me. And I don't really know how to do that other than to just celebrate her for who she is in all the ways possible, and to not treat her like she's a side note to myself.
Well, I think you're doing a great job already. You're, first of all, you survive and you're surviving every day, but you're thriving as well. And that's definitely going to show in her as she continues to grow. So
I hope so.
I think that you're on the right path with that. I'll say that.
Thanks.
So your daughter's going to obviously grow up. She's going to hear about you. There's the internet and whatnot. But is there a moment that you're dreading the most when it comes to that topic in her, and maybe having that conversation with her?
The moment I'm more dreading is it's unfair, mom conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Because like just the question of fairness, and I feel like we don't really have good conversations about that in our society. We don't really have a good grasp on it. We hear, the most that you'll hear is like, well, life isn't fair. And that's a very easy, true answer that doesn't really get into the deep existential experience of that question. Like if my daughter, and it doesn't take long, it's amazing how long, like how not long it takes for a young person to reach a level of sophistication enough to understand that some injustice is being perpetrated against them, that somebody is being treated one way and they're being treated a different way, and it's not fair. And that is such a complicated, sophisticated thing that I have a lot of really heightened feelings about. And I want to be able to I want my daughter to also have a really sophisticated understanding. I want to have like a really genuine conversation with her about that, instead of just that sort of flippant, well, life isn't fair question.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really have a model for how to have that kind of conversation that in age appropriate ways. I'm still sort of figuring that out. I think I'm just going to let my daughter be my guide, because she's going to tell me what she's interested in and what she's curious about and what her questions are. Yeah.
Okay. So real quick, just tell us how we can, support you and find you and, help you in your journey as a mother, as a parent, as an individual person who's innocent. How do we do that? How do we listen to you?
Oh, that's thank you for asking. So my podcast with my husband, which we work very hard on and we're really proud of, is called Labyrinths. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also go to knoxrobinson.com, where we have all the information about all the cool stuff that we work on. We have a Patreon, which you can go to. It's called patreon.com/knoxrobinson, where we offer our patrons a lot of fun, like weekly debates between my husband and I, or like things that we are interested in that we're reading or watching or listening to. And you can find me on Twitter at Amanda Knox and on Instagram at Amama Knox.
Well, I will be following you on both. I know I follow you on Twitter. And for those listeners who are out there who are just paying attention or just tuning in, this has been an excellent podcast session with Amanda Knox. Thank you so much, Amanda, for taking the time to sit with me. Please, please, please go feed your daughter so this way she's not mad at me.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
And that's the end of the episode. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe so you can be notified whenever I publish a new episode.